Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Bovee and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Bill, so Matt, we had to basically kind of focus on the game itself, since everything this week has been about everything but the next game, the New York Jets.
I haven't thought about the Jets once this week. And this is going to be the first time that I do, because everything this week was Ken Dorsey, was Joe Brady, was all of the turmoil happening at One Bills Drive. I forgot that they had a game. And then somebody asked me on Thursday when I was heading to the game. And I said, I don't know, like normal, 9 o'clock. And they're like, well, it's a 4 o'clock game. And I was like, oh, it is?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So,
4:25.
That snuck up on me and slapped me in the face. So, yeah, not only did I not really think about the Jets, I didn't even really think about when the game was happening.
Well, the game is happening Sunday at 4 o'clock. And to help us break down the New York Jets, our guy, my guy, Boy Green, Paul Esden. And, he does a great job. He's always grinding, talking about the Jets. He's got his own podcast on the radio. Paul, I'll let you tell everybody kind of where they can find you to talk about the Jets, to give you your credibility there. But we know you love your Jets, and we're going to talk about them with you. Go ahead, buddy, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. This is awesome. So, do sports talk radio in Syracuse, New York, Sal's old stomping grounds. And so do a little bit of that, and also cover the New York Jets for Heavy.com. And then I'm everywhere, just at Boy Green 25. Branding, baby. Yes, sir. So you can find me.
Boy Green. You're a big Jets fan when your name is Boy Green, Matthew.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, credit the man-child, my radio partner, for that nickname 8 or 9 years ago. And then it's been stuck with me, attached at the hip ever since.
Well, I'll start with this, Paul, that, we have a lot going on here in Buffalo with the firings and everything. You guys have had a really incredibly tumultuous season on your own right there in New York. Mm-hmm. The Jets have.
Yeah.
How do you think that the team has navigated through to this point since week 1, when we were all there on Monday night and saw what happened with Aaron Rodgers?
And it was complicated even in the same night, because the air went out of the stadium for the briefest of moments when Aaron Rodgers goes down, because there's a sense of disbelief, but almost in Jets land belief that, always the other shoe's going to drop. So, for that to happen and Zach Wilson to be thrust in there when he wasn't supposed to play all season, that was there was a loss for words. But credit the coaching staff for rallying the Jets in that wild moment in prime time and everything else. And they ultimately, rallied the troops, get the win in the moment. But then I think everyone thought that even though they won the battle, quote unquote, the war may be lost for the rest of the season with all these crazy playoff aspirations, and for some even greater than that. And then they get punched in the mouth. Dallas, I was at that game. Oh boy, they got obliterated there. And that was really, once they kind of collected their teeth off the ground from week 2, they lost again to the New England Patriots in week 3. And then that's when they went on the after the Chiefs game as well, the 3-game winning streak, found a little moxie. So I think that's where they really recovered, which is kind of weird because it was a loss. But in week 4, Sunday Night Football, Zach Wilson on the threat of, oh boy, we probably got to bench this guy. He found something in that Chiefs game, which they carried, like I said, after that game into a 3-game winning streak. Normally not moral cookies in the NFL, but the Jets seemingly found something there. And the coaching staff kept pointing to that Chiefs game that they found something. But then most recently of late, they've lost 2 in a row when the division looks like potentially ripe for the picking. The Jets lost 2 critical games in primetime on Monday Night Football and Sunday Night Football, respectively, to the Chargers and Raiders. So now they're kind of, it's a boxing match. They got jabbed in the face a little. Their bodies rocking a little. And now we're trying to see, are they falling to the canvas? Or are they going to gather themselves here?
Paul, Sal and I were actually recording a podcast during that Sunday Night Football game when Zach Wilson looked good. It was funny. I saw a tweet. I think it was from Big Cat from Part of My Take. And he was like, Taylor Swift might think that Zach Wilson is the best quarterback in the world right now if this is the first football game she's ever seen. And she's there to watch Travis Kelce. So there was that stretch of the season. And then I watched the Raiders game and I watched the Chargers game. And he looked lost. So what has been the overall kind of big picture on Zach Wilson since he kind of got thrust into this position that nobody thought this year he was going to get thrust into?
Basically, Zach Wilson, within reason, is the same exact guy that he's always been. The Chiefs game was perhaps, one of his better games, and even the Raiders game, quite frankly, up until the backbreaking interception at the end of the game, was playing one of his better games. But it's more so, That's not a great thing to say based on when you look at the numbers and everything. So it was good for Zach Wilson, maybe not good at the same standard for somebody else. So the thing that he got over, which is good for passable offense, is last year he had the yips. He couldn't complete short passes. He was skipping rocks across the pond. So he overcame whatever that was over the offseason with a lot of brand new offensive members of the coaching staff, with Todd Downing and Nathaniel Hackett and all these different guys working with him. There's a few holdovers like Rob Calabrese and others that really worked on his footwork and got all that figured out. So at least that's good. But the problem is he's the quarterback of an offense that hasn't scored a touchdown over 3 weeks. So ultimately it falls down on him. We can nitpick this. Well, he barely stepped out of bounds in the Raiders game. They scored 2 touchdowns in a row, but both of them were called back. It is what it is. It's results-oriented business, and he's the quarterback of a team that's not scoring points offensively. They're averaging 10.3 points per game over the last 3 weeks. That's last in the NFL.
Well, you do have a couple really big playmakers. The Bills saw, obviously, what Garrett Wilson could do Monday night and that nice catch he had, but also, of course, Breece Hall and what he did week 1, coming right back after that injury last year. Where do those guys stand in, the landscape of the offense, given the fact that they really can't score points, but you still have 2 big playmakers there? In fact, I think I read that Garrett Wilson did the players-only meeting thing that the Bills had last week here with Latavius Murray calling it.
Yeah, they did. They rallied the troops, and they thought that they needed to hold themselves accountable and figure out what the hell's going on here. Because again, a level of unacceptability is basically what they were sharing with each other. It's weird. You would think with the quarterback situation, struggling, that Garrett Wilson also would have fallen down struggling, and then Breece Hall maybe would be in a better position. But Breece Hall actually has been struggling over the last 4 games to get going. There's something going on with both offensive line wise and him. It's almost like Nathaniel Hackett's been running him in obvious running situations, so he's getting eaten up in the backfield. And I think that may be affecting his moxie a little, and frustration of not being able to break off those big runs, because that's obviously a massive part of his game. Garrett Wilson, on the other hand, has been getting 100 yards every week over that same span. So they've been finding ways to get him the ball. The players' meeting only happened this past week after the Raiders game, but it almost seemed like it happened a couple of weeks ago, because the Jets offense said, okay, let's just start getting Garrett Wilson the ball. Almost the Aaron Rodgers kind of stuff. Snap the ball, immediately throw it over to him, see if he can make a play and do those kind of things. So he's been a point of emphasis to get the football, and the Jets have been trying to do that a little bit more with Breece Hall in the passing game, with him struggling in the running game. So Breece Hall struggling right now running the football. They're doing okay catching the football. They want to do that a little bit more. Some of those pony packages we saw last year, you get Dalvin and Breece, or Izzy, who's going to replace Michael Carter, who was cut earlier this week for the Jets. Izzy Abanikanda is going to make his debut, his NFL debut against the Buffalo Bills. He's a rookie out of Pittsburgh. So they're going to try to do a little bit of those 2 backs on the field at the same time to create some potential confusion on defense.
Do you think Aaron Rodgers plays again at any point this season? And part B is, why is he lying to everybody? Because I don't think he's going to play at all this season.
It's so funny because, when he goes down and then we get the reports from everybody, it's only like it's over. Like, we're all understood. Our brains are like, Achilles season over. And in some sense, even a bunch of years ago, that was a career ender. Kobe had it at the end of his career. We thought, oh boy, Achilles, that's an impossible thing. Basically to come back from. And then Aaron Rodgers at 39 years of age, you're like, oh, it's over. And then he talks about this new surgery and a new protocol that, we've built him stronger, faster, bigger. And we're like, well, okay, all right. And we're getting these, and it's unique because he's doing the Pat McAfee interviews, right? So we're getting these weird updates every week. Yeah, I'm using about 60% of my body weight on the machines. I'm doing this. And we're getting all these updates. We're like, no, yes, no. That one gif of that lady, So yeah, that's basically it. I have a level of disbelief, but every passing week that he apparently is doing more, and then obviously he's doing the sexy throwing sessions before games. All the cameras are there. That's really revving people up. So I don't know. There's a weird low level of belief with fans. And even the Jets building, the way they're answering things publicly, they are really leaving the door open. Like, if Aaron's healthy enough to play, he'll play. It's just, wow. It's just bizarre how they're handling it. So it makes it seem like it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy Green with us here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. He's got his own podcast. And was it videocast podcast? You do it every morning.
That's correct. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Man, you're grinding all the time, but I know you got to do that. So let's take a moment to talk about the defense here. All right, Paul. So before we get you out of here, let's shift gears, talk about the defense, because obviously that's where the Jets are still very strong. Great players, scheme. They're keeping them in games. They're allowing them to maybe have a chance on offense. What has been the strength of the defense to be able to do that? And if you say everything, that's great. But really, where is this team really making sure that they can stay in games against the opponent?
You guys know this intimately well. It's creating turnovers. The Jets defense did that early in the season in 2022, and then it fell off, and they were in the bottom of the league as it pertained to creating turnovers. This year, they've been incredibly high. Now, that's not something in theory you could count on a week-to-week basis, but somehow in the Jets wins, they are creating a ton of turnovers. Against the Bills in the Week 1 season opener, there was 4. The Eagles, there was 4. So when they're doing it in bunches, it's almost a rain pour situation, which been happening this season. So that's really been the secret sauce of providing short fields for this offense and seeing what they can do. The Jets have only scored on defense once this season. That was the Week 5 Denver Broncos matchup. That was a scoop and score at the end against Russell Wilson. But, creating pressure, of course, with the front 4, and then waiting for the opposing quarterback to make a mistake and then start seeing ghost and not thinking what he thinks he's seeing, and the sense of pressure that's able to develop with only a 4-man rush. They don't blitz very often. Every once in a while, they'll send Quincy screaming. He's been a Pro Bowler this season. He's been spectacular, his evolution and development. But it's really turnovers, and then, of course, creating that pressure. And they've been able to do that with that front 4 all season, and they just rotate. Jermaine Johnson's having a hell of a year. Bryce Huff is perhaps one of the best edge rushers in all football. Quinnen, from a sack perspective, has been missing, MIA, out of action. But according to all the pressure rates and those kinds of analytical numbers, he's doing as good as he was last season, if not better.
Paul, when I sit there, I was in the press box Week 1 when Rodgers goes down, and you're like, okay, well, I think this changes the outlook for sure of this season, but it makes me start to think about the long term too. Yeah. We all know how great the Jets defense is now. What about next year and moving forward, when eventually you do have a quarterback in there who's probably more competitive and can win you games? Like, is the core of this group still very young and something that we could see lead to success long term?
Yes, quite frankly. So you have still Jermaine Johnson on his rookie deal. Quinnen was just signed to the massive deal this offseason. Bryce Huff's going to be the big one on a Jets decision. He was a restricted free agent, played on the 1-year deal for $4.3 million this season, and he's continuing to play on it through the rest of 2023. But man, how much they pay him will be interesting, because his sack numbers aren't insane, but again, the pressure and analytical numbers are really high. So how do the Jets judge that? Because Bryce Huff and his agent are certainly going to be seeking the bag this offseason. Pass rushers always get paid. So he's one that they're going to have to make a decision on. But the rest of the secondary, Sauce is still on his rookie deal. DJ Reed is still in the middle of his 3-year deal that he signed. There might be a little volatility from the safety position. Jordan Whitehead's a pending free agent. CJ Mosley's getting older, but Quincy Williams was also signed this offseason. So yeah, kind of skipping around the entire board. The core is completely intact for the New York Jets, outside of Bryce Huff, which is a decision they're going to have to make. And yeah.
Well, Paul, I have a question about this year's team that I want to piggyback on what Matt just asked you.
Sure.
I look at the numbers on the rush defense. Like, is it just because teams aren't being aggressive with them because they're trying to play kind of, hey, we don't have to really do that against the Jets? Because it's not good. They're ranked 22nd in the league in yards per play against and 31st in yards per game against on the ground.
Yeah, I honestly think, I don't know if there's a number to prove this, but I think they say Zach Wilson's on the other side.
Right.
Like, let's play. It's 3 yards in a cloud of dust and
right.
Force it back to the kid, and he's going to make a mistake. So I think that's more so than some, crazy leaky run defense. I think that's more so what's happening. Maybe in a different situation. Again, Aaron Rodgers never gets hurt, and you're potentially playing with leads here, and you have to operate completely differently. I think, honestly, like I said, I don't know if there's a number to prove this. Maybe it's just a thing we're all thinking watching it. That's how I think other teams are approaching the Jets. And why wouldn't they? Zach Wilson, historically speaking, and even this season, as far as that goes, he's fumbled like 8 times in 4 games. So the fumbles are there, even if the interceptions aren't. So he's constantly turning the ball over, which I imagine other teams are like, they'll shoot themselves in the foot. And that's exactly what the Jets have done for the majority of the season.
All right, and then as far as next year is concerned, there's no way that Woody Johnson would pull the shoot on Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh after losing Aaron Rodgers, right? Or is that possible because maybe they didn't plan well enough for the backup quarterback? Or, hey, they've given you 3 years and it's just not right where we need it. We need a new voice.
I think you can never say never. So I think the only way is some epic collapse. So the Jets are 4-5 right now. If they're, I don't know, 5-12, or 6-13 or whatever that would be. Like, if they're that, that's where Woody Johnson could say, okay, I've had enough. The Jets are on this, the active NFL's most active, longest playoff drought and all those kind of things. But in general, I think the entire group sold Aaron Rodgers on coming to the Jets. Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett, and obviously this entire group, Joe Douglas, the general manager. So they all flew to California and sold Aaron Rodgers on the vision for Woody or anyone to mess around with any part of that picture. That could make Aaron Rodgers go, that's not what I signed up for. And then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. So this is Aaron Rodgers' kingdom, and we're all sitting on the iron throne of Aaron Rodgers. And we just have to, listen and answer all of those things that are included. So I think there's a very small percent chance, because, again, anything can happen, of course. But no, I would be surprised if anything of significance gets altered from now till next season.
What is the realistic outlook for the remainder of the season? I know every fan would say we want to win every game, and hey, who knows? Maybe we could sneak into the playoffs. But what's if we see this, we'll feel good heading into the offseason as we kind of try and do this thing all over again next year?
Yeah, to your point, I mean, Zach Wilson is the backup quarterback. It's hard to remember that because it happened all the way in week one because he's just viewed as the starter. But if you view it from the lens of he's the backup quarterback and wasn't supposed to play, maybe you can alter expectations, but it's hard for the fan base. It's hard for, the coaching staff continues to trot out. Not that I expect anything differently, like, hey, we still have all the same goals that we had before, but obviously that's not very realistic. But I'll be honest, right now there's the Jim Carrey, are you saying there's a chance with everyone? I think they shared it last night on Thursday night. The AFC East over the last 2 weeks are 0-7. I went, what? How is that even possible? And so, with the Jets' next 2 games, they have the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo, which is incredibly challenging. Then the short week Miami game, the first Black Friday game ever. In theory, in a very weird way, you look at the division standings and look what the Jets have, it's kind of there, despite them shooting themselves in the foot and losing these 2 winnable games against the Raiders and Chargers. So there's a weird, small, murmuring belief of that Jim Carrey in the back of their mind saying, is there a chance we could do something here? Because they keep saying they're close on offense, and the defense has been spectacular. So if they really are close, there was 7 of 16 on third down against the Raiders. They had been horrible to this point, the worst third down conversion rate since 1978, this entire season, 45 years. I mean, it's terrible. So if that is a real breadcrumb that they can build on, maybe there is a chance that they can try to make some noise with defense, and in just this particular year where everyone is coming down to the means.
At Boy Green 25, Paul Esden Jr. does a great job covering the Jets, talking about the Jets every day. I know you got your podcast, so you got to run. We're going to let you do that. He is on the radio in Syracuse, the Man-Child Show, the Score 1260, and also heavy on sports, right? That's what's the name of the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast is, because I'm an egotistical maniac, Boy Green Daily. Every day at 7:30, baby. Yes, sir.
All right, well, you got that to go. Hey, we appreciate your time. It's
Thank
early
you, Paul.
morning we're recording this, so everybody knows. And Paul was gracious enough to take time away from his beautiful family and right before his podcast. So thanks, brother. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always game day in Buffalo, baby. Yes.
Yeah,
let's go.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to let Paul go, and let's talk about the rest of the league this week, Matthew. Okay, so, big news on Thursday night. Matt, I was at an event in Rochester. I was emceeing for a charity event, and I was keeping up with the score. I had no idea. I get in my car, third quarter, and I hear Joe Burrow's been out, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Then I see the video later. Boy, the Bengals are in a spot, and all of a sudden, with Burrow and with Watson, we are having a different conversation right now about the AFC and the playoff picture than we were just 4 or 5 days ago.
Yeah. As I was watching that game unfold last night, and Burrow goes down, and you don't know what's going to happen there. And then Deshaun Watson is going to miss the remainder of the season. You don't know what's going to happen there. And then Mark Andrews gets hurt for the Ravens, and it looks like he's going to miss the rest of the season. So their top weapon offensively, besides Lamar, he's now out of the picture. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like Paul just said, so you're telling me there's a chance? Like I would have said adamantly, 10 is the baseline for wins for the Bills. Like if you do not get more than 10 wins, you have no chance because your AFC record is so shot. Now I'm starting to think, well, what if you get 9? maybe there's a little bit of a chance. Maybe there's an outside chance, depending on which teams you're ultimately going to win those extra 4 games against. Obviously, the ceiling should be higher. You should be still trying to say,
Sure.
okay, we can go win 10. We can go win 11. We can win all of our games but one or something like that. But yeah, I mean, the outlook looks different because Zach Taylor says after the game that it might be a sprain for Joe Burrow, but Zach Taylor historically is terrible with injury updates. And I don't know. I watched him try and throw a football on camera, and it looked really bad. So that does not look like a pain tolerance thing. That looks like just an inability to do it in the short term. And they're in the same spot. They're 5-5. They don't have a lot of wiggle room. So I wonder if this is going to be something that's a couple weeks. I don't even think what's the reward of putting him back out there. If this was the Bills, I thought about this last night. If this was the Bills and Josh Allen got injured, I don't think there's any chance he plays the rest of the season.
Interesting. I don't know about that. It would depend on how bad it really is. I mean, he might only have they do have 10 days before their next game. Like if he does have just a sprained wrist, but it is his throwing wrist. I understand what you're saying, but
I'm saying like if you were going to miss a couple games, like if let's say Burrow misses 3 games, like if Josh was going to miss 3 games and they go 1-2 in those games,
right?
You're
then
not
you might
bringing
shut him down.
You're not bringing that guy back when you're 6-8 and you're not making the playoffs to just like, hey, we watched you play hurt at the beginning of the season. Let's do it again and see if we can win out and get to 9-8. Like, I just don't see that happening. You have to protect your asset. You need to protect your player from themselves. But the outlook of the AFC has changed drastically. It is still not a good-looking playoff picture for the Bills. But you look at the teams in front of them, and it's Cincinnati, who already has lost this week. They're 5-5. The Raiders, who I don't necessarily think are, like, legit. And then the Colts, who, once again, I don't know. I don't think they're that legit. And then you get to the actual teams in the playoffs, like Houston. Really like Houston. Love CJ Stroud. But to me, it feels like that might be a year too early. Like they're
Well, let me say this, and I haven't verified this, but it sounds right. I read someone last night who said if the Bills beat the Jets and the Cardinals, and I get that there's not as much of a chance for this, but you never know. If the Bills win and the Cardinals beat the Texans, the Bills are actually back in the 7th seed after this week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy at only 6-5. Now, one of the differences is Bills have played an extra game, so they would have, but that extra game was a loss, really. They already have 5 losses, where most teams have 3. They can't even get past, Cleveland at 6 seed right now only has 3 losses. So you're chasing a lot of people more near the top, but Cleveland is an interesting case because of Deshaun Watson and because they play Pittsburgh this week. Here's what you got to do. This is now, okay, let's do the math. Who do you root for? Who do you think Bills fans should want to win in the Cleveland-Pittsburgh game?
I can look up the analytics and tell you.
No, I do not want you to do that. I want you to tell me because I don't know.
Cleveland-Pittsburgh, you root for Cleveland.
Right. I agree with you because isn't this about who would have the better shot at the end of the year of being there and then so root against that team? And because Pittsburgh just finds ways to win, I don't have as much faith in Cleveland with Dorian Thompson-Robinson playing quarterback. So let them beat Pittsburgh. Give them a loss because I think Cleveland will falter anyway towards the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It kind of says, so I did look up the analytics just to see. It's basically just like a pickup. It doesn't really matter. But this was done before the Deshaun Watson injury. So given that, I would say you root for Cleveland because then it's another loss for Pittsburgh. And then you think that they'll regress a little bit because of their quarterback situation. And just because that's the thing, the Bills have dug themselves in such an unnecessary hole here. And that goes back to the whole Joe Brady, Ken Dorsey thing. If you were going to make this move, which we've talked about extensively, I think you should have done it a couple weeks ago. And I know that they were trying to figure things out and it's not something they take lightly, but if the Bills were 6-4 right now, I think the outlook for the entire rest of the season looks drastically different than it does at 5-5. And I do think there is something to be said about when you make a move like this. I think it sends a little bit of a jolt. Like, I think if they made this move after the Bengals game, they'd beat the Broncos. And offensively, they're better. We have no idea of knowing that. We have no idea. I mean, they could come out and lose to the Jets, and then you're like, well, that's completely wrong. But I just think that it's a little bit too late. Even though they in their heads think that they absolutely still have a chance, it is hard to look at the schedule that they have left and say, oh, yeah, there's 5 wins that they can get. Because it's like, okay, even if you beat the Jets, the Chargers, and the Patriots, then you have to somehow figure out how to beat either the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Cowboys. Who else am I forgetting? The Chargers, like
Dolphins.
Like it's not easy by any stretch.
No. So before we wrap up here, we should at least touch on, hearing from Joe Brady for the first time. What were your impressions down at One Bills Drive of Joe Brady's first press conference as the interim OC?
Can I wildly generalize? And this is just kind of like a feel thing. It's not something.
You can, because I do it every day on the radio, and you'll probably say the same thing I've been saying. So go right ahead.
I think you might be good at this.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know about that. What I say is, you can tell the difference in personality, and I think that's a reason for this happening. And there's never one right way to coach. I say that all the time. It's not you're a bad coach because your personality is this. That's not what it is. I think this particular group of people needed an infusion of a more energetic, positive, upbeat personality than what Ken Dorsey was, and it was permeating. And you totally got that. I don't know if he'll be good at it, but I think that part of it, at least he checked the box.
Yeah, I liked his line about the smoke detectors in the fire. It's like you don't wait for the fire to start to check the smoke detectors, because I think that is really relevant to how the Bills offense has looked at times this year. And it's like you wait for something bad to happen, and then after the game, you try and adjust it, and not during the game. And that's why you put yourself in bad positions. I also think that just in theory, he's a younger guy who won a national championship with LSU not that long ago. You would imagine that he has some fresh, interesting perspective on how an NFL offense is supposed to look now, as opposed to what some coaches believe it's supposed to look like. And then now we need to see what's the tug of war like. Like, does Joe Brady want a lot of balance? Does he want to just have 3 wide receiver sets and do 11 personnel and just say, we're going to stretch this ball all over the field and screw running? I guess we have to see kind of how that happens. Huge test for him this week. I think his test this week, though, is to just make sure that they don't make the mistakes.
Right.
It's almost like
you don't need style points this week.
No, you don't need style points this week. It's like learning how to swim this week in the shallow end of the pool. It's like, we'll get to the deep ends in a couple days, but right now, let's make sure we stay afloat in the shallow end. Let's make sure we don't even get over to that deep end, and hopefully everything is under control.
Yeah, like 16-12 is fine this week, if that's what that takes, right? I mean, whatever that is. If that's what it takes, that's what it takes.
How about 20?
Yeah, right. I get
21.
it. I get it. I know. It would be nice to see that for sure. I like the energy he brings. And I think that the team personality, like I said, wise, will respond to it, but we'll see, what it means for the Bills. Bills, Jets, 4:25 p.m. You ready for these 4:25 games coming up? We got 4:25 home, 4:25 away, bye week, 4:25 away, 4:25 home, and then primetime in LA at 8 o'clock. So here we go. No more primetime for a while. You got one in about a month, but you do have these 4:25 games.
I like 4:25 games. I love 4:25 games at home. 4:25 games on the road are tough, because I feel like it's like, what are you? Because with travel and with everything else going on, I would just rather have either the full primetime or the 1 o'clock game. But 4:25 games at home, I love. I think it's awesome.
All right. Matt Bove over at WKBW TV Channel 7. Sal Capaccio, WGR Sports Radio 550. Mike Robier is our producer. It's always Game Day in Buffalo. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, the Odyssey app, and, of course, on the Sal Sports YouTube page. Thanks for being with us, and thank you very much to Paul Boy Green. He's great, isn't he? He's great.
Yeah,
I love
awesome.
Paul. He's great.
He brought the energy. I needed it.
He brought the energy. Like Joe Brady hopefully is going to bring the energy for the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk to you next time.
Exactly.